The night the house finally went quiet, I was sitting in my little workshop, sanding the edge of an old model boat. I wasn't building anything special, just keeping my hands busy like I always did when the memories came. The smell of cedar still reminded me of Maria. She'd been gone 7 years, but somehow her laughter still lived in the corners of these walls. Adam and Lee were in the living room. Their voices carried through the vents, sharper than usual. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was recording a message on my phone, a little voice note for a charity letter I'd been working on. I wanted to set up a fund in Maria's name for kids who couldn't afford trade school. I hit record, laid the phone down on the bench, and went to refill my coffee. Then I heard her voice, Lee's flat, cold, like winter glass. "He's just a burden now. We need this place for ourselves." I froze mid-step. The floor creaked under my boots. Adam's reply came low, almost ashamed. "Dad won't survive alone anyway." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I wanted to believe I had. But their words hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear, and the craziest thing, my phone was still recording. Every word, every tone. I walked toward the living room, heart pounding against my ribs. They didn't notice me at first, too busy arguing about paint colors and where to put their furniture once the place was theirs. My only son, nodding along like it was normal. "Lee," I said quietly, "what's this about?" She spun around, startled but unashamed. "About time you came out, Raymond. We were just saying it's time you moved somewhere that fits your needs." "My needs," I repeated, my voice cracked. "You mean out of my own home?" She crossed her arms. "Don't act surprised. You can't keep living here forever. We need space. You need care. It's best for everyone." Adam wouldn't meet my eyes, not once. He just stood there, jaw tight, like a man holding his breath through someone else's sin. I tried to laugh, but it came out broken. "Your mother and I built this house. Every nail, every beam, these hands put it there." Lee shrugged. "Then consider it a gift. You've had your turn, Raymond. It's our time now." That's when she grabbed my old jacket off the chair, folded it halfway, and tossed it toward the porch. "Start packing. Maybe that nursing home by the highway still has a room." My knees almost gave out. For a second, I thought the air itself had left the room. "Adam," I whispered, "you're not going to let her." He finally looked at me, but the eyes that met mine weren't the same ones that used to chase kites along the riverbank. "Dad, maybe it's for the best." Lee began throwing my tools into boxes, my chisels, my brushes, the compass Maria had given me when we first opened the shop. Each clang felt like a nail sealing my heart shut. I wanted to scream, to throw her out of the house, but something in me went quiet instead. Maybe it was age, maybe it was pride, or maybe it was that small red light blinking on my phone in the next room, still recording, still capturing every cruel syllable. When she hurled the last box onto the porch, she smiled. "You'll be better off in a nursing home, old man." And Adam, my boy, just stood there, watching, silent. I turned toward the mantel, where Maria's picture sat in its wooden frame. The sunlight caught her eyes, made them glow like she was still here, still watching. My voice came out low, rough as sandpaper. "Your son thinks I'm luggage now, sweetheart." Outside, the wind shifted. I heard it, the rumble of an old truck engine rolling up the gravel driveway, a sound from another life, another time. Lee didn't notice. Adam didn't either. But I did. And for the first time that night, I stopped feeling powerless. If you've ever had a moment when life threw you out of the home you built, you'll understand what that silence feels like. Stay with me. This story isn't just about loss. It's about what happens when the quiet fights back. And if stories like this remind you of someone you love, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more I want to tell you. After Maria passed, the house by the river didn't sound the same. Even the floorboards seemed quieter, like they were mourning with me. I kept working in the woodshop every night, carving scraps that didn't need carving, sanding pieces that were already smooth, just to fill the silence she left behind. I remember sitting there one evening, her laughter still echoing in my head when Adam came by with a ring box and an idea. "Dad," he said, "Lee and I are thinking about getting married, but I need a little help." I looked at my son, the same kid who used to run barefoot down to the dock, hair full of sawdust, eyes full of dreams. He'd been out of work for months. I didn't hesitate. I sold my old fishing boat, the one Maria and I used to take out every Sunday. She called it the Faithful. I figured she'd understand. That money became the start of their life together. Their wedding, their honeymoon, even the down payment on their first car. I thought helping him build his future would somehow keep Maria's love alive a little longer. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first time I met Lee, she shook my hand like she was closing a deal. Pretty girl, sharp eyes, words like sugar that burned a little on the way down. For the first few weeks she was polite enough, but once they moved in with me, just for a few months until they found their footing, Adam said things changed fast. She walked into the living room one morning, stopped in front of Maria's portrait and said, "Your father's too sentimental, who keeps a room like a museum for a dead woman." I felt the air leave my lungs. Adam said nothing. He just stared at the floor. That silence told me everything. A seed had been planted, small but poisonous. It grew quietly between us, watered by her whispers. At first, it was little things. She started calling the master bedroom our space, moved my late wife's sewing chest into storage. Then it was bigger things. "Maybe it's time your dad learned to live somewhere smaller," she told Adam one night, thinking I couldn't hear. I wanted to believe it was just the stress of young marriage that she'd come around. But the house felt colder every week, the laughter gone, replaced by the sound of doors closing a little too hard. Adam, my boy, began avoiding the workshop. Used to be we'd work side by side, him sanding, me shaping. But now, every time he passed the door, he'd look in like I was a ghost haunting the place. We'd eat dinner in silence, Lee scrolling her phone, Adam pretending not to notice how my hands shook when I reached for the salt. I started recording my voice at night, not for anyone else, just for him. A message, a story, something he could play back one day if I wasn't around. "Hey, son," I'd whisper into the phone, "remember the time we fixed the dock after the flood? You said you'd never let this house fall apart. I believed you." Those recordings became my company. Every file named after a memory, summer rain, her laugh, the river at night. I didn't know they'd end up being my lifeline later. Then came the heart scare. Nothing major, the doctor said, but it was enough to make Adam panic. Lee, of course, saw an opportunity. "You should let Adam handle the paperwork," she told me. "You don't need that stress." She made it sound reasonable, even caring. And I wanted to believe they were trying to help, so I signed a few forms. Temporary, just for the renovation loan. The house had needed repairs anyway. The roof, the plumbing, little things Maria used to nag me about. When I handed the pen back, Lee smiled, that polished smile of hers. "Don't worry, Raymond," she said. "We'll take care of everything." It wasn't until weeks later that I realized what those papers really meant. My name was no longer on the deed. The home Maria and I built board by board was now legally his, but by then it didn't matter. The damage was already done, not to the house, but to the bond between a father and his son. I kept working in the shop, pretending not to notice how distant he'd become. But some nights, I'd listen to those voice notes, the ones where I talked to the air, and I'd catch myself saying things like, maybe one day when he hears this, he'll remember who I was before she changed everything. It's strange how love can turn into weakness without you noticing. You start giving, thinking it's kindness, and by the time you realize it's being taken, it's already too late. I didn't know it yet, but every word I'd ever recorded, every whisper in that workshop was about to become my only defense. The night they said it, I remember the sound more than the words. The way Lee's voice sliced through the quiet like a knife through old rope. We can't raise a baby with your father here. A baby. That was how I found out, not from my son, not from family joy or some shared dinner toast, but from a sentence that felt more like an eviction notice. I looked at Adam. My boy couldn't even meet my eyes. A baby, I said quietly, and you didn't think to tell me. Lee crossed her arms. We were going to, but it's complicated. We need space, Raymond. We can't start a family with all of this. All of this, I repeated. You mean me? She didn't even flinch. It's just not healthy for a child to grow up around too much sentimentality. I laughed, couldn't help it. That kind of laugh that sounds more like a cough. So you'll erase me before your child even learns my name. Adam finally spoke, his voice soft, guilty. Dad, you know it's not like that. Lee just thinks. I know what Lee thinks, I interrupted. I've heard it in every word she doesn't say out loud. The silence that followed was heavy enough to break something inside me. That's when I realized this wasn't a passing argument. It was a plan already in motion. Later that week, I saw them whispering over paperwork at the kitchen table. Lee had her laptop open, pen in hand, her tone too sweet to be real. If we sell the place now, we can use the equity to buy somewhere closer to the city. And once everything's settled, we'll give your dad his share, promise. I heard her say it clear as day, his share. Like I was some old investor being bought out of the family company. Adam hesitated at first, but Lee leaned in, touched his arm, whispered something I couldn't catch. A few minutes later, I saw his hand move across the paper. The sound of the pen scratching the signature line. It felt like a nail being driven straight through my chest. He didn't know that the document he signed turned temporary ownership into full transfer. My name was already fading from the papers the way it was fading from their lives. That evening, I sat alone in my workshop, staring at Maria's photo. You'd have known this was coming, I said to her. You'd have told me not to trust that smile. The lamp flickered a little, and for a second I almost believed she was listening. Just then a small knock came at the door. Grandpa Ray. It was Lily, the little girl from next door. 8 years old, freckles like dusted flour, always wearing mismatched socks. She carried a plate of cookies wrapped in foil. Mom baked too many again, she said, grinning. She says you're the only one who won't complain they are burnt. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. Well, I've eaten worse. Once burned an entire batch of bread myself. Your mom probably smelled it across town. Lily giggled, climbing up on a stool. Her eyes drifted over my half-finished wooden boat model. You build things with your heart, Grandpa Ray. That's why they don't break easy. Those words hit me deeper than she could ever know. Out of everyone in that house, the only one who still saw me as something more than an obstacle was a child who wasn't even mine. After she left, I sat there in the quiet again, staring at the old phone on my desk, the one I used to record my voice. I pressed record, the little red light glowing like a pulse. Danny, I said softly, it's Ray. You remember that recording setup you helped me install for the Veterans Project? I've been using it again, but this time it's personal. I paused, listening to my own breath shake. I'm sending you a file, keep it safe, just in case I disappear. Daniel Cross had been my best friend for 40 years, a retired lawyer, the kind of man who could smell trouble before it even knocked. I trusted him with everything. Before I hit send, I added one more line. Don't worry, Danny, I'm not done fighting yet, but I think the storm's coming and I'd rather have someone holding the anchor. I leaned back, the phone still glowing in my hand. Outside, the river moved slow and dark under the moonlight, steady, patient, unbothered by the chaos of the world around it. For a long moment, I just watched it flow and thought about what Lily said. You build things with your heart. That's why they don't break easy. Maybe she was right. Maybe they could take my name off the papers, strip the title, even empty the house. But they couldn't erase what built it. Not the hands that held every plank, not the love that filled its walls, and certainly not the voice now recorded, quietly waiting for the day it would finally be heard. It all started that morning with the sound of boxes scraping across the floor. Lee stood in the living room, hands on her hips, barking orders at two movers like a general commanding troops. Be careful with that cabinet. Actually, no, don't. It's old anyway. Just toss it outside. She didn't see me standing in the doorway, or maybe she did and just didn't care. When I asked what was happening, she turned, her smile thin and poisonous. He's agreed to go. She shouted to the men, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I looked at Adam, my son, my only son. He stood there with his hands stuffed in his pockets, staring at the floor like a child caught cheating on a test. That true? I asked. My voice came out rougher than I intended. He didn't answer. Adam? I pressed. Still nothing. Just that silence that used to mean guilt when he was a boy but now felt like betrayal. The movers started carrying out my things. Chairs, books, boxes of tools, everything that made this place mine. I walked over to the shelf and took down the framed picture of Maria. The glass was a little cracked in the corner from all the years it had been there. My fingers trembled around it. I built this roof for you, I whispered. Lee crossed her arms, a smirk tugging at her mouth. Then take it with you to the nursing home. The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. I wanted to shout, to curse, to tell her what that house meant. But instead I just stood there watching strangers carry my life piece by piece into the sunlight. Then came the worst of it, my tools. My old workbench, the chisels, the plane my father gave me when I was 17. They tossed them out like scrap wood. Hey, I yelled, stepping forward. Be careful with that, that's not junk. One of the movers hesitated, but Lee waved him off. Just do your job, she snapped. The sound of wood cracking echoed through the yard. It was small, maybe a leg from the table or a drawer splitting, but it felt like the sound of my heart breaking. Those tools had fed this family, built every room in that house, even the crib Adam used to sleep in. And now they were lying in the dirt like garbage. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so hard I had to set the picture of Maria on the porch rail before I dropped it. Adam finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time that day. But there was nothing there, no shame, no regret, just a tired kind of emptiness. Son, I said quietly, you really think this is what she'd want? The woman who raised you, the woman who built this home with her hands. He swallowed hard, but Lee cut in before he could speak. Don't drag him into your guilt trip, Raymond. This is what's best for everyone. Everyone, I repeated. You mean best for you. She didn't even bother denying it. You can't expect us to live forever under your roof. We need our own space, our own future. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You already took my space, my future, my home. She stared right back, defiant, her words sharp enough to bleed. Then maybe you shouldn't have signed it away. That's when I realized she knew exactly what she'd done. Every word, every smile, every little kindness, just pieces of a long, patient plan. The movers finished their job and the front yard looked like a yard sale no one would ever come to. Boxes of my memories stacked beside the curb. I could feel the neighbors watching from their windows, whispering. Inside, Lee picked up her phone. "He'll be gone in an hour," she said. "Make sure the nursing home knows we're bringing him today." I wanted to tell her she'd regret this. That life has a way of circling back. But before I could say a word, something else caught my ear. A low rumble. At first, I thought it was thunder. Then the sound grew louder, a deep, sputtering growl of an old truck engine, the kind that makes the windows tremble a little. Lee froze. "What now?" she muttered. I knew that sound. I'd know it anywhere. That engine had a rhythm like a heartbeat out of sync, one piston always a little late. It was Michael's truck, my brother, and he wasn't the type to make casual visits. The movers stopped what they were doing, glancing toward the driveway. Dust rose in the sunlight as the old blue pickup came to a stop by the gate. The door creaked open and a pair of boots hit the gravel. From the porch, Lee squinted. "Who the hell is that?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My pulse steadied for the first time all day. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something else. The neighbor's security camera, the one old Mr. Grant had mounted above his garage. The little red light was blinking, recording everything, every word, every insult, every box they threw out. For the first time in hours, I felt something new. Not fear, not sadness, something colder. Justice. Lee straightened her blouse, her voice sharp again. "Tell your brother to stay out of this." But I just smiled, slow and quiet. "You might want to tell him that yourself." Because whatever storm she thought she'd started, she was about to find out what it feels like when it hits back twice as hard. The truck door slammed shut, and just like that, the air changed. Michael didn't have to raise his voice to own a room, or in this case, the whole yard. He stood there in his faded sheriff's jacket, boots dusted from the road, his eyes like they could see straight through every lie ever told. "So this is what respect looks like in your generation," he said, his tone low even, but heavy enough to make everyone freeze. Lee blinked, her bravado slipping. Adam took a step back like a kid caught red-handed. The movers looked at each other, unsure if they should keep working or disappear. Michael's eyes moved slowly between the two of them. "Go on," he said. "Someone explained to me how throwing your father's life out the window became acceptable behavior." Lee tried first. "This isn't your business, sir. It's a family matter." Michael took one slow step forward. "Family matter," he echoed. "You think disrespecting the man who raised you is a family matter? I call that a disgrace." Then his gaze locked on Adam. "Whose name is on the deed, son?" Adam swallowed hard. "Mine, but Dad told me." Michael cut him off, voice sharp as a whip. "He told you to hold it, not steal it." Lee's face turned pale. She glanced at Adam, but he looked away. The silence stretched until you could hear the wind shift through the trees. And then, as if on cue, a familiar car pulled up. Daniel Cross, my old friend, the retired lawyer. He got out, briefcase in hand, calm as a man who already knew how this would end. "Afternoon," he said, tipping his head politely to Michael before turning to Lee and Adam. "I believe you two have been expecting some documentation." Lee's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Daniel opened the briefcase and took out a few papers, setting them neatly on the hood of Michael's truck. "Original deed," he said. "Signed by Raymond Hale with power of attorney attached. Temporary transfer only. Never intended for sale." He pulled out his phone next and tapped play. The yard filled with voices, Lee's voice. Get him out. The recording said clearly. He's old and the bank won't question the transfer, just make him sign. Her mouth fell open. How did you? I stepped forward from the porch, holding up my own phone. From the workshop camera, I said quietly, the one you didn't bother unplugging. Gasps rippled through the neighbors who had started to gather at the gate, drawn by the noise. Even the movers had stopped completely now, hands frozen mid-air. Michael folded his arms, jaw tight. So, he said, you forged trust, manipulated family, and conspired to steal property. Quite a resume for two people who wanted more space. Lee's voice cracked. You can't prove any of this is legal evidence. Daniel smiled faintly. You'd be surprised what qualifies when it's your own voice. Adam looked like he wanted to disappear. Dad, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Lee said. Michael raised a hand. Save it. You were a grown man when you chose to follow instead of stand up. Lee's composure broke. He's just an old man, she screamed, pointing at me. You're all acting like he's some kind of saint. Michael turned toward her slowly, his expression like stone. If you want to erase him, fine, because the law will erase your rights first. That's when the neighbors started whispering. Phones came out. Someone across the street started recording. Lee's face flushed bright red. You think this is justice? She shouted. He's just an old man clinging to a house. I looked at her, calm now, almost pitying. And you, I said, you're just a lesson for the next generation. The yard went silent. Even the river beyond the fence seemed to hold its breath. Daniel began gathering the papers, his voice steady. I'll file the injunction this afternoon. You'll vacate immediately. Mr. Hale's ownership will be reinstated by morning. Lee turned to Adam, desperate. Say something, stop them. But he didn't. For the first time, my son looked at me, not the floor, not his wife, but me. And in his eyes, I could finally see it, shame. Michael clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder. Be grateful, boy. Not every man gets a chance to face his mistakes while his father's still breathing. Lee tried to speak again, but the words came out broken, strangled by tears and fury. She looked around, at the neighbors, at the cameras, at the evidence stacked against her, and realized there was nowhere left to hide. Daniel snapped his briefcase shut. I suggest you start packing. And just like that, the power shifted. The woman who had ruled the house with her sharp tongue and cold eyes stood there small and trembling, surrounded by the proof of her own cruelty. As Michael turned toward me, he gave a little nod. Told you, Ray, he said quietly. Justice doesn't always come fast, but it shows up right on time. And for the first time in a long while, I believed him. The hearing wasn't like the ones you see on TV, no shouting, no drama. Just cold facts, read out loud in a room that smelled like old paper and regret. Daniel handed the judge a thick folder. All documents verified, he said calmly. Recorded audio and video evidence attached. Elder abuse under investigation. Lee sat at the defendant's table, her hands twisting in her lap. Adam beside her looked smaller somehow, like the weight of what he'd done had finally caught up. The reporters outside the courthouse whispered the headline before the ink even dried. Son and daughter-in-law charged in elder fraud case. For a long moment, I just stood there in the hallway, staring at the seal on the courtroom door. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, it was something heavier. Like closing a chapter you never wanted to write in the first place. When the judge adjourned, cameras flashed like lightning. Daniel guided me through the crowd, steady as always, but then I heard a familiar voice cutting through the noise. Grandpa Ray. It was Lily, running up with her little backpack bouncing behind her. Her mom was chasing after her, calling her name, but that kid didn't slow down. She wrapped her arms around my waist like I was the only safe thing left in the world. "You can stay at my house," she said, looking up with those big brown eyes. "Mom says we have an extra room. You don't need that big house anyway." I knelt down beside her, smiled through the sting in my chest. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said softly. "I still have my tools and my truth." She frowned a little. "But where will you sleep?" "Wherever there's peace," I told her, "and good people." She nodded like she understood, even though she couldn't possibly yet. But maybe that was the beauty of it. Kids don't need to understand to care. The reporters started calling my name then, asking for a statement, a comment, some quote they could twist into headlines. I didn't give them one. I just walked past the cameras, holding Lily's hand, and let Daniel handle the noise. Outside, the air felt clearer. Maybe it was just me breathing for the first time in months without that weight on my chest. Later, sitting on the bench by the courthouse steps, I watched Adam being let out in handcuffs. For a split second, he looked my way. I don't know what I expected. Maybe anger, maybe shame. But what I saw was emptiness. The kind of emptiness you get when you finally realize what you've thrown away can't be bought back. Lee shouted something at the officers, her voice breaking. I didn't listen. Instead, I thought of Maria. I imagined her sitting beside me, her hand on mine, whispering the same thing she used to say whenever life got too loud. "Let the storm pass, Ray. You can't control the thunder, but you can stand tall through it." That evening, I went back to the workshop. The place was a mess, dust everywhere, boxes still unopened from the day they threw me out. But when I turned on the light, the glow fell across my old bench. My tools were still there, scuffed and dented, but waiting for my hands like they always had. I ran my fingers over the wood, the way I used to trace the lines of Maria's face in the morning light. And then I started to speak, not to anyone in particular, just into the quiet that had followed me home. "Maybe I made it too easy for him," I said. "Maybe love without limits becomes blindness." The words came slow, careful, like carving something fragile. I thought giving him everything would make him whole. But sometimes love isn't about giving, it's about teaching where the line stands. I won't let my mistakes bury my dignity. I picked up the chisel, pressed it against the edge of the wood, and for the first time in a long time, the sound of creation replaced the sound of loss. Somewhere outside, the evening breeze carried laughter from Lily's house next door. It wasn't my family, not by blood, but it was enough. And as I worked under that fading sunset, I realized something simple, something Maria probably knew all along. Home isn't just walls and wood. It's the peace you build after the storm finally passes. Time has a way of settling dust even after the biggest storm. A few months passed, and life found its rhythm again, quieter, slower, but cleaner somehow. Lee's trial didn't make the national news, but around town everyone knew. The judge gave her a suspended sentence and ordered her to complete community service at the local nursing home. Some called it mercy. I called it irony. Every day she helped care for people who reminded her of the man she tried to throw away. Maybe that's what real justice looks like, not punishment, but reflection. Adam didn't go to prison, but he paid a price too. He lost his job after the company heard about the case. No one wants an engineer who signs away what isn't his. He sold the car, cleared the debts, and handed the house back without a word. I didn't ask him to. Sometimes silence says enough. The house feels different now, lighter, maybe because it's finally at peace. The neighbors stopped by one weekend carrying something big wrapped in brown paper. When I opened it, I nearly lost my breath, a brand new set of woodworking tools, shiny and untouched. "Thought you could use a fresh start," Old Mr. Grant said, clapping my shoulder. Can't let good hands go idle. I laughed, a real laugh this time, not the kind that hides pain. Guess I've got no excuses left, I told him. After they left, I spent the evening in the workshop, unpacking the new tools one by one. The air smelled like sawdust and rain, that smell that's halfway between work and memory. I was about to call it a night when I noticed an envelope on the bench. No name, just my address written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a folded letter. Dad, it began. I thought I was saving my family, but I lost the only man who ever saved me. I stopped reading for a second, the words blurred. Every time I sand a piece of wood, I hear your hammer's rhythm, patient, steady. You built everything around you with your hands, but I never realized you built me too. I wish I'd understood before I tore it all down. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope one day when you hear the sound of my name, it doesn't hurt anymore. It wasn't signed, but it didn't have to be. I sat there for a long time, staring at the paper. The light from the workshop window stretched across the table, landing right on the words patient, steady. Maria used to say that too, that I never rushed things, that love, like wood, needs time to take shape. The tears came without warning, falling onto the table and darkening the old grain of the wood. I let them fall for him, for her, for all of it. When the last one dropped, I picked up a small block of pine and started carving. Just slow, simple strokes, the kind that teach your hands what your heart's been trying to say. Maybe forgiveness, I whispered to the empty room, is also a form of justice. And somehow saying it out loud made it true. A year passes faster than you think. Seasons blur, pain fades, and what's left, if you're lucky, is purpose. Every morning I walk down to the old community center by the river. It used to be an abandoned storage building, but now a small wooden sign hangs above the door, the Maria Workshop. The name still catches in my throat every time I say it. Inside, the air smells like fresh pine and varnish. The benches are lined with kids from the orphanage, hands small, eyes bright, learning how to shape something solid out of raw wood. They call me Mr. Ray, though a few still slip and call me Grandpa. I don't correct them. Measure twice, cut once. I tell them the same words my father told me, the same ones I whispered to Adam when he was their age. Some lessons are meant to outlive the people who teach them. By noon, the workshop hums with life. Hammer taps, sandpaper rasping, soft laughter echoing against the walls. Sometimes when the light hits just right, I swear I can see Maria standing by the window, smiling the way she used to when I built her something out of nothing. After class, Lily comes by with a watering can that's almost too heavy for her. We plant trees by the riverbank, small maples and birches, the kind that bend but don't break. She says each one needs a name, so we've got Hope, Grace, and Mr. Wobbly because hers keeps leaning sideways. As we work, I watch her hands press soil around the roots, careful and gentle. It reminds me that some things, like kindness, need tending every day or they dry out and die. When the sun starts dipping low, the kids run off, and I sit outside on the porch, wiping sawdust from my hands. That's when the voice in my head, the one I used to keep silent, finally speaks clear. I learned that love must have structure, I think, like a house. Without boundaries, even the strongest beams can collapse. It's strange how true that feels now. Love isn't about giving everything, it's about giving it shape. About teaching the next generation that care without respect isn't care at all. With Daniel's help, I started a fund called Hands That Build Hope. It's for seniors who have been mistreated or pushed aside, people who just need a place to stand again. We've helped 12 families this year. The local news did a segment on it, called it kindness in action. That clip went viral, apparently. Thousands of comments from strangers saying things like, "Kindness is strength, not weakness." Maybe they are right. Maybe that's what we've all been forgetting, that you don't lose by being kind, you lose by giving it to the wrong people and forgetting to save some for yourself. Now, when I lock up the workshop each evening, I look at the photos hanging by the door. One of Maria, one of the kids, and one of that day Lily convinced me to carve a heart into the new wooden sign. Underneath it, she painted the words, "Love builds things that last." The river glows gold in the sunset. The world feels smaller, quieter, but somehow more complete. I walk down to the bank, brush the dirt off my hands, and glance toward the framed picture of Maria I keep in my pocket. Her smile hasn't aged a day. "Maria," I whisper, my voice steady now. I finally built something that won't fall apart, not a house, but a legacy. And for the first time in a long, long while, I feel her there, not as memory, but as foundation, strong, steady, unbreakable. If this story touched you, remember your parents tonight. Call them, thank them, and never let silence replace love.